There's a specific moment you've probably never told anyone about. You're in a room. Everything looks normal. The conversation is fine. People are laughing. And then something small happens. A word, a glance, a shift in someone's energy that you can't quite name. And you feel it. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a frequency only you picked up. You don't say anything. Because what would you even say? Something feels off. Based on what exactly? So you stay quiet. You watch. And 3 days later, 2 weeks later, sometimes a month later, it plays out exactly the way you felt it would. And nobody connects it back to that moment. But you do. This video is about why that happens. And why it's been one of the most misunderstood things. About the way certain brains actually work. What you're about to hear isn't about being gifted or special. It's not a personality quiz result or a motivational reframe. It's actual psychology, research-backed, specific, and for a certain kind of person. It's the first explanation that's going to feel completely accurate. We're going to break down why some people consistently pick up on things. Others walk right past. What's happening in the brain when that occurs. Why it so often turns into self-doubt instead of confidence. And what shifts when you finally understand the mechanism behind it. Stay with this one. Every single second, your brain is receiving roughly 11 million bits of information from the environment around you. The sound of the air conditioning, the slight tension in someone's jaw, the way a coworker answered a question just a fraction too quickly, the energy in a room before anyone has spoken a word. Your brain cannot process all of that consciously, so it filters. Aggressively, it decides what matters and what gets thrown out, before you're even aware it existed. For most people, that filter is set high, efficient, practical. It keeps life manageable. But for some people, that filter is set differently. More comes through, more signals, more texture, more information about what's actually happening in a room versus what people are performing. And here's the part that rarely gets said clearly. That's not a flaw in the system. It's a different setting in the system. One that comes with real advantages and real costs, depending entirely on what you do with it. In the 1990s, researcher Michael Coles and his colleagues began studying something called the error-related negativity, a signal the brain produces in the milliseconds after a mistake is made. What they found was striking. Some people's brains fire that signal significantly stronger than others, not just when they make a mistake, but when they observe something slightly inconsistent happening around them. Their brain is essentially running a quiet background check on reality, constantly comparing what's happening to what was expected, and flagging every mismatch. Most people's brains do this too, but in some people it's amplified. The detection system is more sensitive. It catches smaller discrepancies earlier, which is why those people tend to notice, almost involuntarily, when something doesn't quite add up, when a story has a gap, when someone's words and their body language are pointing in completely different directions. It's not intuition in a mystical sense. It's pattern recognition running faster and deeper than average. Here's where it gets personal. Because living with a brain like this doesn't feel like a superpower. Not at first. Not for a long time, actually. It feels like being slightly out of sync. With every room you walk into, you pick up on the undercurrent of a conversation that everyone else is taking at face value. You sense something shifting in a friendship before the other person has admitted it. You walk into a meeting and know something is wrong before you got there. And the frustrating part isn't the noticing. It's the isolation of noticing alone. Because you can't always explain what you picked up on. You can't always point to the evidence. And when you try, when you say something feels off, or I don't think that's the full story, you often get the same response. You're overthinking it. You're reading too much into things. Not everything is that deep. And over time, you learn. Not consciously, but you learn. You start editing yourself. Before you speak, you start running your own perception through a second filter. You start asking, am I sure? before you've even finished forming the thought. That's not a personality trait. That's a learned response to a specific kind of experience. And it changes things. In a well-known psychology experiment, participants were asked to watch a short video and count how many times a basketball was passed between players. Midway through the video, someone in a full gorilla costume walked through, stopped, beat their chest, walked out. Nearly half of all participants didn't see it. Not because they weren't watching. They were watching intensely. But their attention was so narrowly locked onto the task that their brain had quietly filed everything else under irrelevant and deleted it. This is called inattentional blindness. And it explains a lot about why the world operates the way it does. Most people are focused on the task, the conversation, the surface level, what's directly in front of them. And the gorillas, the real ones, go completely unseen, except by certain people. People whose brains didn't filter that scene as hard, who noticed something was off before they could even identify what it was. That's not distraction. That's a different bandwidth. There's something that happens in relationships when one person consistently sees more than the people around them. It's subtle. It doesn't usually come up directly. But when you regularly read a situation that others only understand in hindsight, people respond to that in one of two ways. Some people find it valuable. They trust it. They start asking for your read on things. Others get uncomfortable without fully understanding why. Because being seen, really seen, isn't always comfortable. It can feel like exposure, even when that was never the intention. So you start making yourself smaller in certain spaces, not because your perception was wrong, because it was right, and that created friction. You learn to hold back, to let things play out instead of naming them, to watch instead of speak. And what looks like quietness is often something much more specific. A highly perceptive person adapting, who has learned that accuracy isn't always welcome. Here's the part most people miss. The perception itself isn't the problem. The brain picking up more signals is just a mechanism, neutral, neither good nor bad. What turns it into a problem is what happens after the signal comes in and gets no useful direction. Think of it like a smoke detector with no exit signs. The alarm works perfectly, but with nowhere to go. The alarm just keeps ringing. That's what overthinking actually is. It's not a character flaw. It's perception with nowhere to land. Information circling back on itself. Because there's no clear output. The thoughts loop. The scenarios multiply. You run 17 versions of a conversation. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your brain is working hard on a signal it doesn't know what to do with yet. And the second guessing? That's not weakness either. That's what years of being accurate and unact knowledge produces. Your brain starts verifying itself. Because validation never showed up. You stopped trusting the signal. Not because it stopped working, but because nobody showed you how to use it. When people start to understand this, something specific shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but the internal relationship changes. Instead of asking, am I overthinking? There's a different question. What am I picking up on here? And what's the most useful thing I can do with it? That changes everything. How you move through decisions, relationships, work. Because the perception was never broken. The doubt was layered on top. And when you start peeling that back, clarity starts to feel like the default. That's the difference between awareness that exhausts you and awareness you can actually use. If this landed, it's probably because this pattern doesn't get talked about clearly. Most conversations go too mystical or too clinical. This sits in the middle, where the real experience lives. If you want to go deeper on this, I've put something in the pinned comment. It's built around this exact pattern. 7 days. Simple structure. No motivation required. Just a clear system. Link is in the description and pinned below. If this made something click for you, share it with someone who would get it. They'll know exactly what you mean. And if you're new here, this is what we talk about. The psychology underneath the experience. The the parts of yourself hard to explain. Subscribe if that sounds right to you. I'll see you in the next one.